Okay, so.
Recording in
The
progress.
recording is in progress, so, one thing, mentioned at the end of the last meeting was, the alternate status of Matt. Uh, Are you interested you've been coming,
Yes.
Are you interested in being an alternate?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to give, everybody a chance to ask our potential alternate, any questions you wanna ask?
Well, everyone looks at me, okay, so why do you wanna be an alternate?
Well, I guess I got interested in this, I haven't been in Lyme very long. And it was mentioned to me as an opportunity by Tim, and I thought it was an opportunity to get to know Lyme. And I've spent, what extra time I have to devote to this, to, going through, the documentation and the zoning book and trying to figure out, what the districts were and trying to get this sense so that I could follow what was going on in here and contribute. I'm not sure I'm at that point yet, but that's my goal. And I think it gives me, I'm not going anywhere, I'm gonna be in Lyme for the duration.
So being an alternate could be a life sentence.
Yeah, I guess I've heard that, or I've suspected that, but, you guys are a bunch of really smart people, and, I'm not sure I can
Flattery
contribute.
will get you far, by the way.
I'm not sure I can contribute, but I guess I'd like to try, so.
Yeah, well, I don't have any doubt that somebody who knows how to, fiddle with hearts, might have the capacity to
There's
fiddle with.
Surprisingly
plants.
little crossover, actually.
Any other questions?
So that's your profession, you're a heart surgeon?
Well, no, I wasn't a heart surgeon, I was an interventional cardiologist, so that ends up being a combination of clinical cardiology, just seeing patients, and then laboratory work, putting in, doing balloon angioplasty and stenting, and
Huh.
dealing with heart attacks and things like that.
Wow, well, thank you for doing that, I'm sure a lot of people really benefited from
You
those
were,
work.
I hope so.
yeah,
Would've
you were
been
in Hitchcock a
helpful
long time, right?
A year ago, year and a
Yeah, I
half
was
ago.
in Hitchcock for almost 35 years, so.
You were at Hitchcock for 35 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
I've actually published a paper with Matt.
That's right.
Wow, what was the paper?
I think it was on diabetes and
And-
risks for,
And angioplasty
And
versus
angioplasty.
surgery.
yep.
I was hoping it was angioplasty and planning.
And
Okay.
solar energy.
Yeah, solar energy, solar angioplasty. Any other questions?
Well, I just,
Follow-up
so
question.
you've watched us go through reviews of, site plans and subdivisions and that what we need to do is always follow the regulations. And if you think that you have that's like a really nice person and you just wanna make sure that they have an easy time here, that's not our job. Our job is really to use the regulations and make sure that every application, achieves the standards that are in the regulations. So, that's our job, and it's not always a nice job, because sometimes people can't do exactly what they wanna do in the way they wanna do it. So, is disappointing people sometimes something that you wanna get involved with?
Well, I don't think anybody wants to disappoint anybody. I guess I think all leadership positions are, they're 90% or 80% or whatever percent you wanna put on it, following the rules, and then there's a percentage in there of discretion.
Right, okay, so.
I guess I think that, you have to be, empathetic, and, these are your townspeople. On the other hand, you have to look down the road and say, what are the consequences of my making this decision or changing this in some way? And, you know, and how are you gonna deal with that?
And apropos to that, I think whether any of us personally, you know, doesn't like something in the zoning, and, you know, especially when it comes to a case, and sort of, you know, why can't we just give this person what they want? That's maybe even doubly disappointing personally, because our job is to execute the planning as it's written, not necessarily as we would like it to be. So I think to your
Yeah,
point.
just, you know, sometimes you feel terrible,
Yeah.
like, cause you disappoint people, or you make them unhappy, and it's not like really what you wanna do. You know, like, there's people, you know, I mean, who, even with the solar, you probably saw the, Kearsarge guy. I mean, we had to make him pretty unhappy, and it's, when it's really a good thing, and you kinda wanna support it, but then, you know, you have to, like, this isn't, you know, what is in the best interest of the town, or, you know, our rules need to apply everywhere, not just to your situation. You have to tell people it's, you don't feel good. I mean, I don't feel good. I'd rather be nice and give them what they want. It's not a whole, you know, and explain to them, you know, but, yeah, so I just wanna make sure you, like, sometimes you feel bad when you leave here.
Or when you, or even when you come here.
It's always good to get out of here, but, you know, so you feel good about that, but sometimes you feel bad about having to follow the rules, and, or my whole thing is, you know, think what's in the best interest of the community. And, you know, and so you gotta step back and really, you know, does this benefit this town? And, you know, sometimes that's hard, so, as long as you're up for that, I mean, welcome aboard from my point of view.
You know, another thing that I guess I'd like to say is that, John and Vicki have been speaking quite a lot about the regulatory side of it, and there's a lot of expertise here in the ordinance, and so it's okay to feel at sea with this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
When you're first starting, because
Absolutely.
it's really bad. It's really difficult. There are lots and lots of things and to learn. And the other thing, the other side of the planning board is to think about what will benefit the town, and to listen to what people are saying when they come in, and, you know, maybe this time, yeah, that's a pretty reasonable thing, but the ordinance doesn't permit it. Well, that then can elicit a conversation about why not? Why can't the ordinance permit this? How would we change this? Because that seemed like a reasonable request. So,
Right.
there's both sides of it, and one of it's a policy side, the other is a regulatory.
That's a really good point, and actually, you know, like the solar thing is a type of example of that. It's not the only, you know, but we got a master plan chapter, which definitely led us to feel that we had to expand things. So I think that's one example, but there are certainly a lot more than that. Well, any other questions?
I wanted to add to the statement that there's lots of training opportunities, and through the Office of Strategic Initiatives, which, that might not even be their name right now.
No, they're not.
Yeah,
They're
they've
somebody
changed,
else.
but they
Yes.
have they have
The state.
videos, you know.
Yeah,
like
I've
what-
already, I've been through the state website
Okay,
and
'cause-
looked at the,
Yeah,
you know, what a planning board is for and
Mhm.
what
oh,
you.
good, yeah, so
you
you've already
know.
got, yeah, because I think those are really useful, and you don't have to go to conferences, you can learn on your own time. And the other thing is if you don't understand, raise your hand and ask, why are we doing it this way, you know, and so it's a refresher and learning opportunity for everybody, especially people in the audience who might think these people are, you know, arcane, this process is too strange, and, you know, why are we doing this? Like having a completed application, why do you have to go through that first before you actually consider a plan? And, you know, so ask questions, because we need to all be on the same page, and
Is there a statewide mailing list of things that go out?
Plan Link is the
Plan.
statewide,
How do I get on that?
I don't know.
You go to that Office of Strategic Initiatives and you can sign up through them.
They
But-
run it,
But
that's
they
right.
run it, but that state office has changed, I don't even know what it is, it's resource, economic and planning, is it economy and planning or something?
That's really good, Vicki, yeah.
I think it is.
Do we have to,
You just send them a little, if you say, how do I, in the
It's
health
a-
thing,
it's
how do
a-
I join listserv?
It's on
Or
this
the
server,
Plan
whatever.
Plan Link is what
This
it's
is-
called, Plan
right.
Link.
Plan with a dash, I think,
Plan
link.
Link, yeah.
Well, in any case, it sounds to me like you would like to go ahead with this. Are there any other questions or comments for Nat?
I don't have a question for him, but how many alternates do we?
I believe we can have 5. yeah.
5.
Yeah,
Come on.
so this will be number 3, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion
Business and economic affairs?
to, I'd like to make a motion to, what is it, appoint?
Yes.
Appoint Nat Niles, is that your?
Right.
Nat Niles, make sure I'm appointing the right person, as an alternate on, to the planning board. Is there a second? I see a second from my colleague David Kahn to my left, to your right. And now we can vote on it, right?
Yeah.
All those in favor? It is unanimously, I mean, that is so rare.
So, you're now tagged for 3 years. So, and then Patty Jenks, the town clerk, has to do an oath of office for you to sign. And so I'll talk to her tomorrow, and then we'll let you know when that's ready, maybe next week or so, and you can come in, sign that, and then you're,
Okay.
You still have
Officially.
another guy.
So, and you have all the books and everything?
I'll get a packet of every information,
Okay.
I'll make sure you have
Got a few
everything.
books.
Okay, so anything that you need, David will get
Yep.
you. And
If you need an updated,
on behalf of the board, I'd really like to thank you for doing this. And on, you know, if I may, on behalf of the town, so.
so I think I got the regulations and that was it.
I can, yeah, if you need
Well,
more, just,
you
I
should
haven't
have,
gotten any packet.
you should have everything.
okay, which is just, it'll be
Yeah,
When you say the regulations, what do you mean?
the zoning ordinance,
Zoning
yeah, they're just the subdivision regulations,
Have the
the,
site plan review.
site plan review,
Yeah.
committee handbook.
This is all I got.
I will get everything through.
So,
Yeah.
okay. All right,
So I have one more.
oh, yeah,
Um,
oh, the zoning board.
Yes, zoning board is going through some changes. Longtime serving member Frank Bowles is moving out of town. And so, in order to fill his place, I'd like to move up, and the board would like to move up Zoe Washburn to a full-time member from an alternate.
Okay.
And so I'd like to ask the board to appoint her as a full-time member.
None of us are, you know, have attended many zoning board meetings recently, so, in large part, I personally would rely on you. How do you feel?
I feel very good about it.
Okay.
She's very consistent about attending meetings. She asks very poignant questions. She's very familiar with the ordinance. She is, I believe she's a real estate or a property manager, does that type of thing, so she is very familiar with real estate.
Okay.
And I think would be a very good person and she's done very well as an alternate. She's sat on several hearings.
She's been on there for a while.
She's been on there about a year now.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions?
No, I don't know her, so.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you know where she lives? Is she the one that lives on north on Route 10?
No, she lives up on Horton Lane.
Oh, okay.
There's kind of a group of people up on Horton Lane that, in Franklin
all-
Hill that
all
are
of the
the
zoning
zoning board.
So when they have Christmas parties, we have to post the Christmas parties.
Exactly.
I'd like to make a motion to, what am I, motion?
To appoint Zoe Washburn as a full-time member of the zoning board.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second,
Vicky gets the second. All those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? Okay,
Thank you very much. The board will very much appreciate having a full board.
I bet. So,
David, can
so,
you tell me who else is on the zoning board?
Bill Malcolm, I'm trying to go through the.
Who's the chair now?
Well, that we is still, Frank was the chair. I think Bill Malcolm will take over the chair.
I've got the list here, too.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, there's, Helena Whitty,
Right.
she lives on Franklin Hill, she was right at the first farm as you make that corner. Used to be Maddox.
The Maddox, but,
Yeah,
Oh, it's a Maddox.
and then,
And Judy Tuchula.
yeah, Judy Tinchula. Yeah, we've had a lot of changes recently. Lynn Parshall was on it, and then she stepped down. Sue Ryan was on it. She was fantastic. She's been in town a lot of years and knew everything that was going on.
She left.
She went to Lebanon, she
Yep.
lives at the Woodlands now.
yeah.
Wow.
And so she's left, and so we have a lot of new people, and still gonna look for some more members.
So we have a full board, are there any alternates left?
I need to go through my head, cause there's, I think we have one alternate, but I think there's now four, cause you have, Zoe, Helena, Bill, and Judy. So Judy, I gotta talk to her, see if she wants to step up. Cause she's an alternate, and then that would.
Oh, cause you're only up to 4 now?
Yeah,
Oh, wow, okay, so that would wipe out any alternates.
yeah,
All right,
so I'll probably come back to you after
yeah, sure.
the zoning board this month and ask if she wants to. And even my recorder has moved to Orford.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
there.
Right there.
A select board member usually participate in those or no?
No, that's the
No, but
one,
you can have a joint member with the planning board, and I think that's often really helpful to have a member of the planning board also be a zoning board member.
Or
Anybody's
alternate?
interested. Yeah, yes, it could be an alternate.
would you like to volunteer?
Me?
Yes.
No, no, that's way too much like work.
I figured I'd ask, cause
Anybody
I'm
want to
trying
be
to
a
fill.
zoning board alternate?
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
Paul Mayo, who was a member of this board, was
Yeah.
also a zoning board alternate.
Oh, he is?
He was.
Oh, he was, he left?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving on, so, let's get on, we'll get on to the, of course, the solar, but I just wanted to go over what we might wanna do this year ideally. And oh, you wanna do the minutes? We can do the minutes? Okay,
Get
yeah,
out of the way.
yeah, okay. Minutes, never mind, ignore what I just said.
I had a question on the second page. I think it's kind of out of context. This is Richard Mingus moved to approve the minutes as amended.
I think it should be the approve the second residence.
Yeah.
And I don't
noticed
remember
that
whether
too.
I made that motion or not. Take
It
credit
looked
for
like
it.
the minutes got
I think I-
inflated with the case.
Yeah, I think I may have did a copy and paste and,
Okay, so it's just,
Yeah.
I moved to approve the,
yeah, because you approved the minutes and then I just grabbed that whole section and forgot to.
Yeah, just
So
a second.
you
The other-
need to fix that and then add a approval of the minutes separately?
No, that's up at the top, item one.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
already
see,
in there?
It just got put in.
So just basically approve the
Okay,
application.
okay.
Yeah. And the only other thing I had was, Bob Seelig, is it S-E-E
LIG.
or S-E, it's two E's, right?
Yep.
Yeah, well, in the members of the public present, you just need to add an E,
Oh.
that's all. There's a typo. Yeah, it's correct in item 2, but it's, anyway.
Then Dave, you had one,
Yes, CB should be referred to as Ms. Quinton or whatever she likes,
Just as
but
long as you're
but not by the
consistent.
first
Yeah.
name, her first name.
I don't mind as long as everybody's referred to by the
But
first
that's
name.
not the case.
yes,
Everybody else is
right, so
referred
which
to
would
as-
you prefer, Ms., Mrs.?
Just be consistent, if you're gonna call somebody Mr. Such and Such, then I have to be Ms.
But
Clinton.
do you
But which
prefer
do you
Ms.
prefer, for
or?
Ms., Mrs., or?
Oh, Ms., yeah.
Okay.
Lord. I didn't even think of that as a question.
Her ladyship, I mean, I'm good with that too.
That would be fine, that would be fine.
All right,
Dave, did you get a chance to look at that issue that?
Yes.
So is there any,
So, Nat had brought up a question about the Seelig application. Because part of the lot was in the Mountain and Forest District. Questioned how that would have affected, and I got two answers.
The new house was in the.
Well, the new house, first of all, the location of the house is immaterial, because it's not part of the criteria that the board has set forth in the ordinance to look at. So that, where that house was, is basically immaterial to the application.
Although the table does say that
But
there are different specifications depending
Right,
upon.
but the different specifications will deal when the house gets built. If it crosses the district, then we'll have to deal with that at the house level then. But the subdivision, there is nothing in the criteria for that application, in the lot size averaging that says the location of the house has any bearing on the case.
So they didn't have to give you the location of the house.
Right, they didn't have to give you.
They just had to say, we want to build another.
Right,
Yeah, we were just doing the subdivision, but not the house.
and so as far as the lots go, because it is split, could you do a subdivision and you're looking at, well, you're split by the mountain forest and the rural. And there are two things that I saw in that. One, that lot was part of a 3-lot subdivision, and all 3 lots, or I'm sorry, 2 of the 3 lots had land in the mountain and forest district. And the board approved, post-zoning approved that subdivision with the rules for the rural district. So there is precedence by the board to basically ignore that back property and say, okay, we're going to set the rules of that front roadside area.
So they finessed the stringency or
Yeah.
the most restrictive
Yeah,
rule.
that was years ago, right, David?
Yeah. Now, the second thing that can, if you wanted to look at it another way, to do a subdivision, if you were to take all of the backlands for the mountain and forest districts and put that in a conservation lot without a driveway, without road frontage, that's allowed. So you could do a subdivision where you put that lot in a conservation lot, it becomes its own back lot by itself, and then you would have only the land within the rural district, and the rules would apply to that.
Okay.
So there are ways to get there that may not have been said in the meeting, but
Right,
either the fact that the board had already set a precedence,
right.
or the fact you could create a conservation lot within that subdivision, the fake subdivision, or however you wanna term it.
Anyway, obviously, a good question.
Absolutely.
Glad I wasn't here for that. All right, so, we have the solar, amendment, obviously.
So, did you vote to approve the minute? No.
Okay, I would like to make well, I wasn't here, so somebody else make a motion. Okay,
I'll move. I'll move to approve the minutes as amended.
okay, Rich Meggie, seconds, who was, you were on last, okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, try this again. Solar energy, these are the things that we were talking about doing last year. So obviously solar energy, housing chapter, and possibly some housing related amendments. Obviously, the priority is the solar energy, we need to get that done. So one thing I wanted to ask after, following that meeting, and maybe Hebe, you can help clarify this for me. We had talked generally before, well, in 6 months we'll know such and such, and it kind of sounded to me like even at the end of 6 months, it's not like we're gonna know all that much. It's gonna be a process, right?
It is a process because it's very new,
Right.
and there's a bunch of communities that are, you were talking about the CPCNH,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a bunch of communities that are just starting now to do it, and so we expect to learn a whole lot from their experience. And the other thing is that when the agreement is signed with the select board, we'll be actually able to tap into the CPC, NH, information and expertise, which we have only sort of an arm's length ability to access right now.
So it'll be better.
Exactly, exactly, and we can actively engage with them and ask for their help moving forward with our, you know, our understanding of the current, what needs to be done.
So this isn't something, I mean, I had been thinking, oh, in 6 months, it was just new to me, way beyond what it was to you. So when I first heard about it, I was thinking, oh, in 6 months, we'll have clarity and then we can, but there's no reason to, we should forge ahead and just get this thing done.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Okay.
because after all of our clarity is in, you know, brought out as much as possible in the next 6 to 9 months, we still have to bring a warrant article to the town to see, do you guys wanna, like, join with this?
And then it sounded like even after that, they're gonna be multi-steps.
Well, then things could happen more quickly to actually contract for energy through CP. I mean, that's what's happening now in these towns around, they approved them in the last year or so.
Okay.
So,
And also the energy market is really changing fast, so we
Yeah.
don't really know where we're gonna be.
Right.
so at some point, from what I understand, at some point, the town has to put up some money for this?
No,
I mean-
there's never any money that comes from the town
Okay.
into this process. What happens is that once the people, the town agrees to go, and it's an opt-out arrangement, there's a small administrative fee that is attached to the cost of the energy to produce some administrative funds for other things and perhaps, you know, funding infrastructure and other
So the
things.
town pays?
The town doesn't, the individual
The resident.
ratepayers pay.
The people who
Okay.
don't
People
opt
that-
out pay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
people who participate will have a small administrative fee added to their rate.
Okay, and, yeah, and presumably the rate will be obviously less than, who knows?
Gosh, I hope so.
And then there may be a graded,
It doesn't
Where-
necessarily, because you could get 100% green and it might be exactly what, you know,
Right.
Eversource is
Yeah.
charging now.
If you're willing to pay the premium.
Right,
if-
yeah.
And if green continues to be more expensive.
Right,
yeah.
so,
Yeah. Well, see,
so you don't know.
John and I both signed up for all green.
Just when Eversource cut their prices.
They only
But
come
we're
2
paying
cents though.
14,
Yeah,
yeah, 14.29, and I'm all green.
plus
Nice.
plus 2 years of
That's great.
Amazon Prime
Is that direct energy?
and a chauffeur.
Yeah, I did it yesterday, I called it, yeah. So for 21 months, I'm all green for 14.2,
That's good.
Wow, yeah.
So, all right, so that meeting was, I thought was really informative and also like, there's just so much stuff.
Did Mark share his slides?
Yes, I have it if you would like it.
Yeah, I'd like, why don't you send it
I'll
to
just
all
send it
of
to
us?
everyone.
So, in thinking about this, are we generally okay with the small SES? I mean, we may do things that might change that, but do we wanna sort of just leave that as is for now and just,
I'm good with it.
okay?
And everybody else, I
So
mean,
that's
Yeah,
2,000 square feet.
Yes, I mean, we should. So I think let me be specific about the question you're asking. There's SES and then there's the not so SES and then there's the enormous, and we decided not to do enormous. But
Well,
there's-
I don't know what we decided. I think we have a small SES
Mhm.
and then we had, as it's written in.
We called it large.
What large, but.
Right.
Right.
Was really mid-size.
But it's, yeah, I mean, I think everything's open for discussion at this point, because that's kind of why we kicked it down the road, because
Right.
it was just too confusing.
Well, there's too much unknown information
Exactly.
that, yes. You know, so personally, I'm okay with the small
Up to 2,000.
up to 2,000, that's a
Okay.
no-brainer, I'm very
Okay.
content with that. What we were calling large in that ordinance, the draft that we wrote, I don't know, I have mixed feelings, I think that that's not enough. But I think we're gonna learn more, I mean, it was really helpful to have Mark come and give all that information. And so, to let the LEAC go ahead and say, to find more out, we can then, when they know more, we can say, yes, the so-called large system that we talked about is either enough, or, no, that's not really the right answer, and we should do more.
I don't think you should wait. for
Yeah,
the
that's what I was just
LEAC.
gonna say, that was what I was just asking.
The LEAC is buying on the market, it's not gonna be,
Well,
I think
but
if you look at, the goal that was set at town meeting for, 100%
Mhm.
renewable electricity by 2013. The LEAC is looking at one way in
Mhm.
which, the town might be able to buy green energy. So that's one way to get part of the way there. I think solar, the board looking at solar
Mhm.
is another step to getting there, and there might be other steps, but I think this is an independent step
Okay.
that the board needs to look and say, well, look at the community solar projects, looking at large solar projects, how they, what can you do to make sure they benefit Lyme? Those are the things that the board can do. Anything else kind of outside that is gonna be outside of the board's purview. It's how, I think right now you just look at how you can allow, or not necessarily allow, but promote solar energy in a way that will help the town get to that goal. That's,
Yeah, I mean, based on what Hebe said, it sounded like, LEAC is gonna be there,
Mhm.
but if we wait for them, that's not gonna help us much. The other issues that were raised last week were very compelling, and there were so many of them. One of them was how fast things are changing, so that the assumptions that we're making, and this is really also connected to why, at least I wanted to kick it down the road at the end. The assumptions that we're making may no longer apply, or may have very different impacts.
Like, I think Stephen Doig brought
Stephen
that
Doig,
out.
yeah.
I mean, he's saying you have to look at 10 to 15 years from now, and so we don't do something now that we regret
Mhm.
down the road, which is
So
hard.
how will we know?
We don't. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really,
No, I mean, that's a serious
It's-
question. What
it-
could we do in, well, it's now March of 2023,
right.
to come up with answers to the do better?
Well, I mean, I think one thing is to have more of those joint meetings,
Mhm.
even if we could have them once a month or something, just to see if nothing's changed in that month, or things, the assumptions stay the same. But I guess we have enough information where all of us can make some kind of a judgment, for ourselves about what we think is reasonable or unreasonable.
Well, it strikes me that some other things that we could do to attempt to make a more informed decision about what this ordinance ought to look like we could reach out to the two utilities that serve Lyme and ask them if they could send someone to talk to us as a board and provide
Very good, yeah.
information about, how much capacity their system has to absorb additional solar energy input. And that might help us start to zero in on what sort of natural limits, if any, there are to the size of these kind of units, these kind of facilities that might exist in Lyme. Another thing that, that we could do, the classic lawyer move, when you don't have technical expertise, you go out and get an expert. You go out and you seek somebody who has technical expertise and you ask them to talk to you about. Right now what we're doing is we're sort of mooching off of Mark Bollinger's expertise and after that meeting, and
Steve
Steve
Doig.
Doig. And those people might be appropriate experts to actually
Those are
seek out
two
and
pretty
ask to
good
talk to us.
Yeah.
But there might be, I don't know, there may be other people out there who do this for a living, and that we might seek to communicate and maybe even engage on a paid basis to provide advice to us.
Okay.
I think Stephen Doig
They
was gonna
did say
check,
New Hampshire.
he was
Yeah.
gonna check with New Hampshire Co-op about.
I'll call him up and ask him
Yeah,
about that.
cause, and didn't Mark say that 200 kilowatts is the limit at the moment?
200 on one and 250 on the other, but he, if I understood correctly, I think he qualified
Yeah.
that by saying that a lot of times in connection with the installation of these sorts of projects, they'll upgrade the infrastructure so that they could.
He said it was very common for
Yeah.
companies like Kearsarge to just upgrade it to what they want. And he even said that with the 200, those were figures, if I remember correctly, from the utilities, and that they tend to lowball them.
But you know what, we might have a view about that, I don't really understand, I mean, in our initial draft that we have shelved right now, we seem to be against the idea of permitting, or, you know, we didn't wanna big utility upgrades in connection with any of these
Right.
projects. And that may be our position, but maybe not, I
Maybe
think
not.
we should understand what
Yeah, 'cause
those sort of upgrades entail and
Right.
what the costs of them are.
Right, I mean, three-phase, we know that adds a whole nother wire, large wire, but I don't know what it means to upgrade to, just
Yeah.
more than 200.
I think it's beyond the capacity of the planning board to deal with supply infrastructure issues, beyond saying how much you wanna allow people to modify their own property to tap into it. If somebody comes forward with a big project and the infrastructure is not up to it, it's not our problem. And we don't have to like pre-screen things for the capacity of the infrastructure to maintain, I mean, that's kind of, we don't need to worry about that.
Right.
So, but one thing we were doing, I mean, that might be a very good point, but one thing I think we were doing, maybe incorrectly, was we were depending upon what the board thought was three-phase power areas to limit where it could go. Now, we may not wanna, consistent with what you're saying, we may just wanna not have that as a consideration, and maybe just talk about, well, where do we want it, where do we not want it, but
I'm not sure I agree with you, Hebe. I think if it turned out that upgrading the infrastructure entailed putting in big metal towers to carry the lines, and, you know, that might have an effect on the town and the way it looks and
But I don't
the
think
character, and we might wanna say, okay, for example, if Eversource came in here and said, to permit 500,000 kilowatt project, we're gonna have to put in metal towers, you know, the big transmission towers that you see running across the desert. We might wanna say, well, no, then we don't wanna allow projects that big.
But is that, I mean, if they have a right of way, aren't there already specific limits on what they can put in that right of way?
I don't know enough about that.
We could say you can't put in a
But-
solar project that big, and
Yeah, I mean, the
sort of
planning
shut it
board,
down that way.
yeah, there may, I'm sure there are laws about what they can and can't do, and what, but as a board, we certainly have the right to limit it regardless of what they might be allowed to do.
So I wanna pick up on something that David said, and I mean, how do we get the expertise? Mark did, to speak to your point, Mark did an interesting study, he looked at, well, maybe we could put them here and here and here, and that was like,
So impressive, by the way.
really,
That's a great
really
presentation.
hand wavy. He said, I don't believe any of this, but, if these conditions count, are useful, we might be able to do this. You suggested, David, that you get an expert in. I wonder if, in the interest of efficiency of this board's time, maybe one or two members of the board could speak with Eversource, could speak with New Hampshire Electric Co-op and say, bring them a list of questions and say, these are the things that we wanna know. It's like, could you have these, megawatt arrays on every corner, on every street corner? Or, what's your infrastructure carry, and what would it look like if it
isn't that what we wanna talk to them about face to face?
Yeah, I think they should come to the
Well, I don't know,
meeting.
I mean, if,
I mean, basically, we got the runaround in the common, like undergrounding, and it was
Mhm.
like a bunch of different people talking to them, and
Well,
different people talking to us. And I
sure.
think that, you know, a sit down so that we get like one story that we're all gonna, you know, operate from is
Okay.
much better
All right,
than.
I mean,
than-
that's certainly fine, if, and I was just saying, in the interest of efficiency, but if everybody wants to have a
Well, we
straight story
can,
from these people.
we can write down the questions
Yeah.
and have whoever comes to talk to us prepared with maps and
Yeah, sure.
to talk to
Mhm.
us about those
Okay.
questions.
And
And I
that's a
think
really
that-
good idea,
And I
okay.
think we invite the energy committee because we benefit
Mhm.
from them getting to interact with those people
Yep.
also.
Okay.
And then we get a better picture about what we can do for our community.
Cause Eversource came and spoke to us
Well,
about the underground.
Yeah, I know, but didn't you get a different story from somebody else? I mean-
No, they came basically and said we needed to give them $40,000 up front before they'd start anything, essentially. But I think, you know, they were nice, I mean, they were good when they came, or they gave us information. So anyway, I think they'd be happy to come and talk
Mhm.
to us.
I think one of the takeaways that I think I understood was, that the upgrades might be less if the demand is, if the energy is used in the town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And-
thinkable, yeah.
And it seems to me, I think I also heard that, you know, that your group, the CPC New Hampshire,
The leak,
the leak group,
She's LEAC.
the LEAC might be interested in getting a contract with, you know, a solar producer in town, or
well,
with.
what it would be was CPCNH would be willing to contract with a solar producer in town.
Yeah,
They're gonna be the agent that negotiates with different suppliers.
Correct me when I'm wrong. I think the leak is when, is who is basically on behalf of the town figuring this all out, but it's the CP that's gonna be the functioning entity.
but
Yeah,
I mean,
that's-
that could provide, more overhead or maybe less overhead if, you know, if the townspeople decided they wanted to have their own system and administer it on their own.
Completely cut the CPCNH out of it at that point.
Yeah, but then
Yeah.
who pays for it? I mean, it'd be millions of dollars, so you have to pay for it.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, the users would pay for it. I mean, you'd get subscribers and,
Right, so we'd have our own electrical company for the town of Lyme, really,
well,
kind of.
I think,
You'd have-
isn't there a problem with that, with liability and stuff?
Well,
Wasn't
I
it
think
one
there's
of-
also a problem that if you know, with a project like that, unless you have battery storage or you're burning fossil fuel
That's
somewhere
right,
else,
that's
some
true.
other time, you're not
Right.
gonna have power in winter or at night.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
well, people have to give up something, Dave.
no, but I mean, it could just be a net metered
Yeah.
project.
Yes, yes,
And,
yes.
and so, you know, you
Yeah.
get your daytime power
Mhm.
when the sun's shining, and then you get the rest of your power.
Right. From the-
And, you know, to Vicky's point, you may end up being held hostage by the utility that you're net metering with, and so maybe it won't be cheaper in the end, but it just seemed like, you know, that was something that I thought might be of interest, to the town, people, because,
Yeah, I mean,
there's not
the
that many
suggestion
of
was
us.
that if there was some large solar installation that was close to the center of town, all of the local lines would be just distributing that to the houses around the common, for example.
Right.
So wasn't this one of the models that Mark had talked about, the neighborhood model?
Yeah,
So there was some special responsibility about the person whose land it was on. And I can't remember precisely what that was.
There was a
They
limit
had
to how
They had to be the
large.
driver of it,
Yes.
and they had to get all the granting and the.
Yeah, there would be one person who would essentially be the
developer.
the developer of it.
There was, yeah, there was two models, one was the individual and then there was the group. But then there was also a size limit, private versus a public.
Right, I think it was, 1 megawatt is what
Yeah.
is the maximum that
Yeah.
the state allows. and-
For private groups.
Yeah.
So a neighborhood model could do a 1 megawatt,
Right.
if they had enough, if they had the land and somebody was willing to do it, wouldn't have to have any commercial, input at all,
Right,
Yeah.
5 acres,
but not in Lyme right now.
not in Lyme now.
And I think we figured out that, what, 2.5 to 3 megawatts would do the whole town.
Oh, I think it's more than that, I think.
I thought we figured out that we could have maybe 3 megawatts.
So it was
Do
100
the whole town.
to 200 households per megawatt.
Per megawatt, yeah.
Yeah, so 3 megawatts would in theory be could be 800 to 900 households.
There's 1,060 roughly
Yeah, it's
properties
right around
in the
1,000,
town.
Yeah, well, there may be.
There's about
But some of them may not
800
be
houses.
inhabited though, so.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, 4 megawatts would do the whole
Right.
town essentially.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's right, so 4 5-acre parcels might serve the town.
do the whole town, yeah.
So I think it's a great idea to invite Eversource and NHEC to come in and,
So I'm
Maybe
gonna.
we'll just tell them that, we wanna develop 4 5-acre parcels to fuel our community, cause we aren't gonna make it to 2030 at 100%. How do we do that? I
Well,
mean,
but
and-
that's not us, that's not
Well,
the planning board.
Well, but how,
we would
how,
like to encourage
how,
people,
how
yeah.
could we do that in this town? And they may say, well, the planning board needs to change this, and there needs to be investors to do that, and
Right.
then we need the land, I mean, but like, walk us through that, you know?
So I'm gonna call Stephen Doig, because he said that he was gonna
Talk to
talk to.
New Hampshire Electric Co-op.
Right.
He said, yeah.
Who wants to call our friends at Eversource? Don't all raise your hands at
I
once.
don't have a friend
Well,
there.
Dina,
No, don't do that.
well, no, I was just gonna say, she was the one that has the info, cause she called the land, she
Oh,
has
for
a
you,
contact.
for the for the common?
Yeah. I think
It
she
seems to
might-
me that once we've developed, once we've gotten this information and maybe put pen to paper a little bit and started to flesh out what this ordinance might look like, we also have to go back to the town, right? Because
yeah.
what we
Absolutely.
sent to them the last time is gonna be very
Yeah.
different.
Can we start with New Hampshire Electric Co-op, because their
We can.
motivations are more
Right.
friendly than
Yeah.
Eversource.
Yeah.
And there's, have said in the past that they're doing their job right, they'd be out of business, so.
Right,
So
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
that they would
impressive.
be more collaborative.
yeah, so
Whereas
I'll
Eversource
call
would be-
Stephen and see if he'll facilitate that, and if
Mhm.
it sounds like he won't, then I'll just call them.
And Eversource is the major supplier in town,
Yeah.
but people are turning away from them. But if we could take what we learned from New Hampshire Cooperative and talk to Eversource
Right.
with more,
Mhm.
Well, you know, the
More
thing
skill,
with,
yeah,
I think that
background.
they were talking about it the last time. And I think it was in Articles too. Eversource and Liberty buy 2 times a year. Whereas New Hampshire Energy Co-op is not regulated because they're a co-op. So they actually have a lot more freedom, or just good intentions, to get a better deal.
Right.
There was an article in the Valley News about how people are so outraged about their energy bills that there is a move afoot to try and force Liberty and Eversource to have a different arrangement for buying. But that's a big gap between the co-op and those two.
So, you know whether the co-op has an option of all green? I mean, do they,
I don't know.
you know what their rating
I
is?
really, I don't know. I mean, they sort of have a tendril of supply that comes over from someplace, and, I mean, when we were, we're north of town on Route 10, where we were 20 years ago, we were on New Hampshire Electric Co-op, and there aren't very many places in town that
Well,
have
Lyme
it.
Center is, because
Yeah,
my
we
house in Lyme
It's
Center.
sort of a little
Yeah.
tendril that
Yeah.
comes over
Yeah,
the mountain.
It's the northeast corner, I think.
And it, it was not, and the lines were hard to maintain, and
Well, it's because
Power's
they're,
always going
yeah,
out.
they're overland more than on,
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
road corridors.
exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only good thing about about Eversource now is that if you don't have solar panels, I guess you can just make a phone call and buy your electricity all green.
Mhm.
I mean, that's one advantage of Eversource right there.
So, do we wanna start writing drafting questions to ask NHEC?
Why not?
I mean,
Yeah.
Let's not waste, waste any more
Right.
time. Questions?
so, I mean, first, it's like we heard, actually, I was looking at my notes, and they can take, 112 kilowatts.
Who are we
This is,
talking?
NHEC could take a 112 kilowatt array without upgrades.
112?
Well, I think we,
And
You
just to
asked
say,
that, yeah.
what does that mean? You know, does that
well,
mean
is that
like,
even true?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so why don't we just ask them,
Yeah.
instead of secondhand, let's just ask them, what's your capacity?
What are the limits on infrastructure,
right,
you know?
Yeah, I'd be more general like that. Are there natural limits? You know, as a planning board, we're trying to craft an ordinance and we're trying to figure out if there are natural limits about how large a system we ought to be permitting and are, you know, based on your infrastructure, are there natural limits to
Right.
what we should permit?
And then if you hit that limit,
right.
what happens next?
Does New Hampshire Electric Cooperative have any three-phase power?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Mhm.
The-
Yeah.
the
I can't
skiway-
Does
think
it come
but they have.
Baker Hill Road?
Isn't the skiway on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes up over Baker Hill Road, that's right.
Yeah, cause the skiway uses a huge amount, so they're three-phase.
And they're on New Hampshire.
Yes,
So
If you
David,
go up Dorchester Road, just past Lyme Center, if you look to the south, you'll see where the lines come in, and they have basically a large,
It's an enormous thing there, yeah.
yeah, that's where they break their three-phase. They do bring it up to the skiway, but then they also break it down to the single-phase lines that go into all the, and I believe it also, they do have a three-phase, it goes up Baker Hill that ends at the
Yes.
top of where Franklin and Acorn Hill
so
meet.
do we wanna also ask
Kind of
them
came
where?
back down over Goose Pond and.
Yeah.
Well, it comes
Yeah.
down, it comes up over Baker Hill, and then cuts over to Goose Pond,
Yeah.
runs just north of Goose Pond, almost to the Hanover lines. For the Hanover line, it crosses Goose
If you-
Pond and then goes south.
If you drive along and you look at the top of the power poles, and you see three little nubbins,
Right.
three-phase.
So do we wanna, we're gonna ask them about any natural limits, do we wanna just ask them where they have three-phase as well, or?
Well, I think that's a good, where could you install, where could somebody in Lyme install a big system?
So
And they'll probably say Baker Hill Road, you know, the things we know, but it would be nice to hear it from.
should we ask them specifically where they, you know, where they have three-phase, or just generally like that?
I think we know where they have three-phase.
Do we?
Well, Mark,
Yeah.
Because
Well,
Mark's
chart.
Mark's chart was not, with Eversource, he had where all the three-phase was.
He
but-
had that with them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did that.
I need
I
to
mean,
look,
why
I haven't
not
had a
ask
chance to
them
look at the
just to be sure?
website.
Sure.
Well, you know, I would suggest redundancy, because,
Right.
information can
Right.
be old or confusing.
Mhm.
I would ask, go right to the horse's
Absolutely.
mouth.
So,
Yeah,
right,
three-phase.
another question that, I mean, what I think we should do is ask them ahead of time all these questions and say,
Right.
these are the things we're gonna ask you
Sure.
about.
Yeah.
Another one is, okay, suppose we wanted to cite, suppose somebody came to the planning board and said, I wanna cite 3 megawatt fields, or 3 people came, each saying they wanted to cite a megawatt field. What would you say to that? What would the implications of that be?
If they were all on the co-op's lines.
Yes, sure, and they might say, oh, no, 112 kilowatts, that's it, forget it. I mean, I don't know what they would say, but to say, if somebody wanted to do this, it would be, in some sense, good for Lyme, because that would get us most of the way to 100% renewable. But maybe the infrastructure can't take it. So, I mean, it's yet another way to ask that question, so that we have better information.
Okay,
So-
are you getting these questions?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And then how about what infrastructure changes need to be made differently depending upon whether the power is shipped out of Lyme versus stays in Lyme?
Great,
Right, does it make a
Yeah.
difference? Yeah.
right. local.
And what, and how, you know, how invasive would the, would the infrastructure be if you were shipping out?
Right,
Or even if you.
Because that might be a natural boundary right there, it's
Right.
just, we're not gonna let you put up, you know, that,
right,
This big metal
as was
towers.
mentioned, you know.
right. Or even locally, we should know exactly what we're getting.
I would like to understand what the implications on infrastructure upgrades are. You know, are there tiers of that, and, you know, what do those entail,
Right.
and what do they look like, and what other costs
Yeah.
are there associated with those kind of changes?
Right.
Yeah,
I'm sure they got a dog and pony show that answers all these questions, but we should be sure to ask them.
that'd
so
be
that-
great, yeah.
Because people are gonna ask us, it's like, well, what does that look like? Not to worry, it looks just the same as, or what?
Yeah, whatever it looks like, we can tell them.
Well, you know, when you're looking at a pole, you know, having basic three-phase power, okay, you have a top tier, it's got 3 lines. As you increase power, you're gonna increase your wire size. You're also going to have to increase the distance between the wires,
Maybe, yeah.
because, you know, you're carrying more current, you have a greater chance of it arcing between the two, you spread them apart. Then you also have to ask, well, what's the, how far are you gonna cut back the trees?
Ooh.
Because, you know, when you think of line trimming, they have a specification of how far they cut back, and if it's, you know, how far are they gonna wanna cut back your,
You gotta cut it back by 50 feet from them? Whoa. So, I mean, a right of way
That's a really good
maintenance
question.
is,
I wanna ask about RF too.
maybe, sure.
Or, what is that?
What's our-
radio frequency
Yeah.
interference?
We used to go, my wife and I used to go rock hunting out in the Mojave Desert, and there were places where these big, huge power transmission cables ran overhead from, I think, Hoover Dam to like Los Angeles or some of the big cities. And if you go out and stand under those with a neon light bulb, just the bulb, and wave it around, it'll light up. Because the things are putting off so much radio frequency, and, you know, I don't know what those levels are, but I think they get bigger as the amount of power being transmitted
Makes
gets
sense,
bigger.
yeah.
And people might not be so excited about living near something like that.
Right, and is there a sound,
Yes,
was there a buzz?
They hum.
They hum.
You know, Dave, speaking of that, just quickly, when Lynn was working in the hospital in pediatrics, back, I think it was in the 80s, maybe early 90s, they had a really high percentage of kids with cancer from Wentworth and Romney, that area over there where there's huge power lines, and the hospital was actually doing somewhat of a study. And I don't think they came up with anything definitive,
No,
but
there's
there was,
never been a cluster identified around that.
yeah, but they had a high percentage of kids, you know, for whatever reason, coming from near those power lines.
A lot of
so-
clusters, you see a lot of points, then you draw a circle around them, you know, it's not,
Yeah, well, anyway, they were concerned at the time, and they
Yeah.
were doing studies.
Yeah.
I
it's
think the
never been shown.
radon is a worse thing.
Yep, I agree.
Well, all right, so, well, you got all those questions?
The other question, you know, I'd also ask is, you know, if you, as you're putting in these larger power lines, there is a setback that you have to maintain for structures. So if you upgrade your power lines, then, you know, is that going to interfere with, you know, we have a pretty good setback of 75 feet from most roads, but, you know, is that going to be affecting it, you know, what the town has for
Right.
the natural setbacks?
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like a lot of these questions are gonna lead to us just getting a better understanding of how the scale will affect everything that we're doing on the ground and what we might like to change.
So we have 821 housing units is what they say, for 2020.
Oh, then maybe three.
Yeah,
3
three,
megawatts don't
yeah,
do it.
we-
That's before Rich did his subdivision.
They're not housing units.
So, okay, so that raises a question that we were talking about before. Everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have been saying, well, if we can get this goal, which was the 0, then we're set. before there was discussion, well, you know, that's a good goal, but, do we wanna, is that the goal? Or do we wanna do stuff beyond that? And, yeah,
So there's three different companies, there's Liberty, there's,
I don't think Liberty has.
Yeah, I don't think Liberty
so
is-
Liberty's out, so there's two
Yeah.
different
I-
companies.
Liberty does
There's
level.
New Hampshire Electric Cooperative and there's Eversource.
yeah, I think
Now,
Eversource
there
is
would
like
seem to be some
80%.
barrier between, you know, like when Sam was here, he was saying, well, you know, we would have to go with Eversource, we could only service Eversource customers. There seemed to be some barrier between,
Mhm.
you know,
Yes.
those lines. And we might ask the person about that too. Is that a real barrier, or is
Well,
that just?
Sam, I think that's, that was relative to basically the deal that he was working with. So he was looking at that property, which was an Eversource property essentially. So that tied him into Eversource.
Okay.
CPCNH is working with Eversource.
Who is?
CPCNH, that's
Okay.
the.
But wouldn't anybody with any property in Lyme be tied into one company
Well,
or
it's
the
just,
other?
I
it's
think
one
so.
big grid, I mean, that's the thing, is it,
It is one big
Yeah,
grid,
that's-
that's what I just tried,
yeah.
that's what I'm trying to clarify.
yeah, well, I mean, if there, is that photon going from Route 10 up to, you know, the skiway?
I think it's an
Probably
electron.
I think it's an
not.
electron, right?
Yeah,
The
okay.
color of these ones are
Yeah.
green and those
Yeah,
ones are
okay,
blue.
You
okay.
move 1/60th of a second one
but
way and then
I
1/60th
think it's
of a
like,
second.
you know, the
Actually move.
domino effect, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it hits all the.
That's
yeah,
why you
everything
just
gets up
call
that
them
way.
tons. You know,
Okay,
you don't-
tons,
That way you
okay.
don't give yourself away.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
that ton will be fine.
But Nat, I think there is a disconnect between Eversource and the co-op, you know, with their lines. In other words, that you can't put electricity
Yeah,
across one and the
The
other.
question is, are they proprietary, and I assume they
Right,
are.
it seems to me, actually, the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative must be supplying a significant, if there's only 850.
821.
So
households.
Lyme, I mean, when my power went out the other day, I'm on New Hampshire Electric Cooperative, it just popped up, the total number of people in Lyme, and it's like 325.
Oh,
So that's a
Yeah,
significant
that
part
is.
of 800. They're much more of a contributor, I think, than we thought.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
there might be power users that are not households.
Right, yeah,
Right.
there's
So,
commercial.
This
Yeah.
building would not be considered a household, it would be, but
Yeah.
it's, we're.
But it's
on,
Anyway.
consuming power. I mean.
Right, but it's not a household that would be counted as, where you're getting the
Yeah.
household is, so it's,
Oh, I
when
see.
you look
Well,
at
we need to
individual
think about-
customers,
Yeah. What we
Okay.
need to think about is the residential load as well as the commercial load when we're planning our, ultimate, ready for 20. Does
That's
that
right.
pledge say that it's households, or is it everybody's electricity needs to
Says
be?
Lyme,
I think,
Yeah,
I
it's
think
just a general thing.
So it-
But
it's
another thing that came up last week
Scale,
with
yeah.
that Stephen
Yeah.
Doig pointed out was, how do you measure that zero? It sounds great, but it's a
Well,
little
it's
bit.
very precatory, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because there's people who don't care about this and who don't, or there may even be people who are affirmatively opposed to it, and
Right.
you can't
Rolling
compel
coal.
those people to.
Yeah.
Right, so I mean, I think it is aspirational, if we got close, we
It's
can pat
aspirational,
ourselves on the,
right.
on-
Yeah, I don't think we're, we're gonna go out there with a measuring stick.
Well, not everybody has to use it, but what if we generated that much in our community?
Right.
You know,
Right.
so,
I think it's gonna come down to dollars. I mean, it always comes down to the money, you know, if it's cheaper, people will do it, if it's not, they won't.
So would we
So
wanna
service-
ask them also what they think that they're selling to Lyme residents? I mean,
What do you mean, what they
what,
think?
how green is
What,
it?
what is the demand? I
Oh.
mean, maybe they can
Yeah.
tell us that,
number of customers.
well, the number of customers, but also the kilowatts, you know.
Yeah.
How many
So-
kilowatts of
so-
power are we using?
Once the agreement is signed with CPCNH, and then we will have access to being able to ask Eversource for that data.
By agreement, you mean the joint powers agreement or a cost sharing agreement?
The joint powers agreement for the select board, that, then we have a standing to ask Eversource for the data, and the CPCNH has had some expertise on how to analyze it as well, so they can advise us.
So wouldn't that be after we'd already done this amendment though?
No,
Oh,
no,
we'll already have
that's
that?
in the next, as soon as the select board decides
Oh,
to sign it, they're
okay.
having it
Oh, that'd be
reviewed by
great. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
council.
we discussed it with council, at, this week, and I think we're gonna it's gonna come up, and maybe we'll have a decision on, not this Thursday,
Oh,
but next.
fantastic, so it's imminent.
Today.
It doesn't go to town meeting.
No,
No,
that's
no,
just
it's-
that's just a select board decision.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking in advance, especially if we're meeting with the New Hampshire Electric Co-op people, maybe they can tell us.
So,
Yeah,
In order to replace
sure.
how
what
would
you're
you phrase,
buying.
how would you phrase that?
What you
What
just
is
said,
our-
in
what is our
order to
demand?
replace,
Fossil
your
fuel.
supply with
No,
solar.
fossil fuel,
Right, what would Lyme have to do to support your customers, your current customer base? How many megawatts?
So would we, excuse my
Yeah,
ignorance
no,
here.
go ahead, it's,
But are we essentially asking them to tell us, give us a means to use to steal their customers away?
Yes.
oh, no, because they're,
Yes.
we would not be touching the distribution side,
They
only
would
the
still be-
supply
yeah,
side.
They'd still be
Yeah,
making money on
Cause
it.
they don't,
Exactly.
they don't produce their own power,
No.
so we would be, you
Well,
know,
they do with the windmills, they own those.
or, yeah.
Over in
Yeah.
Plymouth, they do?
Yeah, Tenny Mountain, I think, is owned by the
Really?
Hampshire Electric Co-op.
Well,
But-
since the
but I
guy
think
said,
we can ask, we say, so like, how many megawatts would it take to satisfy all of your customers in Lyme? And they might say it's proprietary information, we say, that's
Okay.
fine, thank you.
right.
We'll wait, then we'll get it later.
we'll get the Eversource side, we'll get the Eversource side, and it's, you know, 2/3 of the customers in town, so it'll probably
Right.
be enough to generalize.
You can ballpark numbers.
So they're already into windmill technology?
The windmills on Tenny Mountain, is
In,
New Hampshire
how
Electric
many
Co-op.
Plymouth,
You know, when you're
Oh.
driving on 25.
Yeah, I
going
think there's a
Plymouth.
lot of
Over
them,
to
right?
Plymouth.
There are a
Like
lot of
7
them.
or
Six
13.
Oh,
six
there's
or
a lot,
seven,
yeah.
So,
I mean, I.
how do we feel about windmills?
whoa, there's a whole ordinance that talks about it.
Yeah.
There's
we
a
don't-
small wind energy.
I mean, that's renewable.
Yeah, what,
It's-
what we have is small, we wouldn't, something like that would not be enabled right now.
The basic gist is that Lyme is not a good place for wind power. That's if you look at there are maps out there that show all the areas that, and you would think that along the river you would get, currents down the river, along the river valley, but it doesn't
And
happen.
they
No.
measured up on the skiway too.
Yeah,
When I was on the energy committee back during the Lincoln administration, they measured and the winds were not consistent enough.
that was the big thing, is that it's not a consistent.
Right. It only happens when the Ford staircase are out there.
Well, that's just
The
because they're
list is
speeding up
loaded.
the
Blows
Dorchester Road,
straight up
creating
the
a.
hill into your face when you're trying to ski down.
So, yeah, I mean, in terms of wind, there's not a lot
Yeah, it's not enough to make it
that's enabled, right?
financially. worthwhile.
Everybody, just like you can have, your own solar system, you can have your own, small-sized generator, windmill, on your property. And it's limited, and it has a height limit, and it's not allowed to be, larger, even within that limit, then if it falls over, it'll fall on your neighbor's property. So it's not gonna be real big.
There's some big properties in Lyme.
Yeah,
There are a lot of
they
properties that
can
can take
they can have
5
the,
or 6 windmills.
yeah, they can have the skyscraper windmills.
You still,
No, there's still a
geographically,
general,
it's just a
I
bad.
forget the size
Nobody
limit,
can
but
see it.
Well, it's up and down,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't produce consistent enough winds to run the windmills like they need to, so.
Yeah.
The windmills over there are actually owned by Iberdrola, Renovables. on renewables, they get renewables, so it's not owned by the electric co-op.
So they're not producing energy there,
They
somebody
are
else
not.
is.
It's called the Groton Wind Farm, and it's owned by Iberdrola Renewables.
Right, and they're selling it to whoever,
Sold to N-Star under a power purchase agreement, and will go to the Boston area, so that's being
Oh.
exported to Boston. They're
Sure.
not helping us.
So, one thing that, I don't know if it applies, whether it's in our wheelhouse or not, but, what are the tax implications on these bigger systems? I mean, has the select board talked about this? And, I mean, at some point, I would think that if it's a commercial entity,
Well, I
wouldn't
thought,
it be taxed?
I'm asking both of you, but somebody said something, and maybe it was when Sam from Kearsarge was
Yeah,
here,
he said something.
that we voted as a town or
Yeah.
to not make them taxable.
Yes, we did.
Well, caveat, you voted, the decision, under the state law that allows for it, systems that are supplying a residence are tax exempt. So if you're
Any
supplying your
system-
own,
Any system,
if you're supplying your own power,
oh, your
Or-
own power,
yeah.
okay.
then they're tax exempt. As soon as you are supplying it to something else,
Oh, oh,
then, you know, if it's on your own property, you know, in your case, Rich, you're supplying power for your farm, for the
Sugaring.
sugaring, that's tax exempt.
Yeah.
If you start,
Even though he occasionally sells power back into the grid.
yeah, because you're using that to offset the power used by your
Right.
residents. And this was done before net metering was even a thing, so, but the general idea is you're using that power to either supply yourself or to offset.
And by tax exempt, you mean that the value of that solar system is not added to the value of the real estate for
Correct.
property tax purposes?
Correct.
Okay.
But as I read the state regulations on this, it's apparent that a commercial solar project that is going where the power is going elsewhere, it no longer is tax exempt, the systems.
would not be taxes.
So Sam was wrong then, really.
Well, that
He was wrong in a
also-
lot of things.
Also, that means that the select board have to be nosy, or somebody has to be nosy about where that power is going, which is like what we didn't want to do. We did not want to be nosy about like who you're selling your power to, you know, through zoning and land use regulation. But
Right.
evidently you guys are, because for tax assessing.
Yeah, I
So you already
guess,
know that.
I guess probably the assessor would be doing that. And
Right.
presumably these small systems where, you know, you have a tracker outside your house or something, you don't have to worry about it. But
Yeah.
when it starts to get to be bigger, I'm not sure there are any real bigger systems right now in the town of
Yeah,
Walden.
There are,
No,
I think it would be obvious, though, what do you think, Vicky? I mean,
They haven't
pretty
been
obvious.
allowed.
well,
Right.
Well, no, it's not regulated now.
it's not regular,
But
but
it's
you,
not regulated by the solar ordinance, but it's regulated by.
you're
other
still not
rules.
going to, if I see, you know,
Right.
Kearsarge, if they came and said, we want to do this,
Yeah.
it's a commercial use in a non-commercial area. Sorry, can't
Yeah.
allow that.
Yeah.
We haven't had any of those.
Mhm.
What about the tax credit? If you are in a group that puts in, a neighborhood group that
Right.
built an installation, would you be able to use the tax credit?
Those are federal income tax credits.
So your share, could you have a share, and could that?
I think you can, I'm not an expert on that, but that's
think
not
you
a
can.
state or a town
yeah, I think that's
thing.
something you'd have to speak to your accountant about.
No, I know, it would
But
just,
Mark-
it's just
Mark
sort of,
indicated you would.
it's an incentive that,
Oh,
that
so, okay,
Well,
is
yeah, Mark-
definitely
Mark-
out there.
here's an answer to your question.
Yeah, Mark's presentation, he indicated
Yeah.
that you would.
Yeah.
I heard that also, yeah.
Yeah.
he said-
But it's a capital improvement, so it's not subject to state property taxes.
Capital improvement on what?
I mean, you're getting the tax credit on the capital you're putting into building the
Right.
solar.
Right, so, I mean,
Okay.
you need to talk to.
So
your
your
accountant.
share of it,
Yeah.
So that's.
even though it's not on your land.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think usually you can't move credits around, the federal tax laws usually don't allow that, but I think with some of these solar energy things, they do, they
did,
become
they were saying
transferable.
that explicitly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then
But
what
I mean,
about
that's a big incentive
The
for
only thing
actually a neighborhood,
The
Yeah.
increased value of the
30%.
property would be allowed to be taxed.
Yeah, I'd wanna be very
But-
cautious
You need
about
local
that
property
in
tax.
terms
But you- but
of
it-
making assumptions.
but if it wasn't on your property, it's moot.
No, that would be on whatever
Right.
property.
Right.
Right,
But you
Whoever's
probably have to
proposed.
share, you might have to share that,
expense.
that proper,
It
local property.
would be all part of
tax,
it,
yeah.
that there was different
Cost.
scenarios that Mark laid out with different tax
Yeah.
situations.
I don't know, it might be worth knowing more about the particulars of that neighborhood model and what incentives apply
Yeah.
and then what are the responsibilities of that person who owns the land.
I think Mark knows that, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We could ask him again.
Next time we meet with him, we can ask him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and, I think too, we wanna get a little, we don't wanna get too much in the design to hark to what Hebe was saying, that we don't need to know everything about all the deals as a planning board.
Right.
We wanna know, could you put it here or there, or what kinds of places would work? I mean, it's fascinating to know all the other details, but.
I would think we would wanna know the feasibility of that model.
Right.
Because that's an important model for
Yeah,
what we're
so,
thinking.
so just walk us through how that would influence our planning with this. If we knew,
Well, that would be a component.
Well, I think it's a
of-
good chance that we're not gonna want a big installation that is shipping power out of Lyme because of the infrastructure issues.
Right.
Which means that what we would prefer is an installation which just served Lyme residents.
okay,
And
I see.
And so the most straightforward way of doing that would be the neighborhood model. There might be commercial places that would come in, like Sam, maybe he would come in and do something like that.
So even
but-
if we got that information, I'm just trying to understand how this, so even if we got that information, and let's say that information was positive, that, this would work out well, would that tell us, how would that influence our thinking? This is really.
A community system that state caps out at 1 megawatt, then, you'd be looking at a 1 megawatt limitation. And that would give you a size,
That was the 1 megawatt limit was for private.
I don't know, but,
Would a
if you know
neighborhood group
each
be
scenario and what
private?
you
Isn't
could
a
build under.
neighborhood group private?
Yeah, and that's the 1 megawatt limit. If you wanna go higher than that, though, there was a provision.
Again, knowing which scenario, how big you can go with each scenario, and how each scenario would, if you wanna go bigger, then you can also sell it on the open market, means that it can be shipped to Boston.
Well, in any case, we can ask Mark,
Yeah.
so we can get that information.
So that would be a component of reaching the goal by 2030.
All right, so,
It also ties in.
so, let's come back to this, is that our goal, is that our main goal, to hit this target?
Yes.
Okay,
I mean, I think
Well,
so,
it's
that's.
to promote.
the town
so,
voted,
so
yeah,
that, so,
I'm
That-
not sure I agree with Vicky on that. I think our goal should be to draft an ordinance that tells people what they can do. And that sort of policy question, while we may feel like that's a good idea, I don't know that it's up to us.
Well, but.
We need to
Wait,
craft our amendment to accommodate it, though.
Yeah, I agree with
Otherwise,
that.
we're in the way.
But,
We're not gonna make that happen, but we need to make sure that it can happen.
You don't wanna
Yeah, I-
prevent it from happening, the
Right.
goal from
Right.
not being met
Right.
because
I agree with
the
you.
ordinance.
okay, so then we can
Right.
use that as a, that's helpful, we can use that as a target, we want to enable this goal. So
Yes.
that gives us
Yes.
something,
Yes.
cause I feel like we're just kinda squishing around here.
Well, I mean,
But
you
that-
know,
that gives us a-
part of achieving that goal is, okay, we've already got X%, being generated by the households that already have solar. So, you know, we can probably whittle away at it and then,
But that gives us a hard figure,
yes,
okay.
yep.
Do you know how many
We don't know
small
what it is.
solar? Do you know how much small solar there is
I
in
think
town?
they said it's 12% of the households.
I would have to,
Yes.
But that's
think Mark
12%
said-
of the households, but that's not necessarily
It's not
12%
the
of
load.
the load.
Yeah.
no, I would have to, I can figure out how many households have, how many permits in the last,
And how big they are.
Well, I think.
But the
think
size, I
Energy
don't track
Committee
that.
has
You don't?
no,
But
it doesn't
we-
make have any bearing on my decision,
You
so.
would
But
take-
is it not part of the permit?
No,
The Energy Committee knows that.
How would they?
I think they ask people, just like Henry keeps track of the cars, I think that, you know, they keep track of the solar.
Good, excellent.
Yeah, so I think, but, you know, and if they don't, they're the people that would have
So we're talking
best
about 100,
information.
roughly, you know, between 90 and 100.
yeah, that seems like a reasonable,
So what would you say the average, could you guess what the average generation would be?
I mean, most people, you know, they put in a tracker, a single tracker, so whatever,
Whatever that is, does anybody know, what's the single you have?
I don't have a tracker, but I think you're like 6 or 7.
6 or
Yeah,
7, so,
I was gonna say
No, I
seven.
think they're more like 15.
A tracker?
Yeah.
Really,
Okay.
16
so you
panels.
got,
I should know this, I
I
have
used
two
to
of them,
know.
but I didn't.
But I remember Eric Furstenberg has two, and I
Right.
think he said he generates something like 15 or 16 total.
Oh, okay, maybe I'm not.
yeah, his is
When they're
bigger than a
working.
single, than a tracker.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Right.
so multiply 100 times whatever that figure is.
7 kilowatts.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
But, you know, the other thing to remember is
385
that,
watt panels, they're 6,000 kilowatts,
Okay,
because there's 16 panels on.
yeah, that's right, yeah.
Alright, so that gives us a
and then you
ballpark
also
figure.
need to just remember that, you know, measuring kilowatts versus kilowatt hours, because, you know, you're only generating
Right.
a certain amount of time during the day, and
Right.
people use power all, you know,
Right, so you
That was
cut
Steve
that,
Delig's point there.
Right.
yeah, it's like 2/3, you knock off 2/3, the winter and the nighttime.
Right. That's right.
but, you know, measuring how much a panel can produce is, you know, it's not producing that
Right,
24/7.
that's a good point.
I'd also like to just make one thought that I've had going on is that knowing that we can't know everything, we could always write into the regulations some generous provision for approval by, you know, special exception or whatever, so that, you know, the board could review things, not keep people from even trying some new
For
things. And-
something that's, well, I guess, and
Innovative.
that's a double-edged sword.
It
So I mean,
is.
the question is,
Yeah.
I'm
I'm sure the ZBA would be happy.
Well, then if things
Well,
start to
we
come
could-
up in a regular way, you could think about modifying the law, the rules,
you know,
the ordinance.
The only
Good.
thing is, when you have any type of special exception
Yeah.
or go through a conditional use permit,
Right.
you have to have criteria
Right,
to make that decision.
oh,
Okay?
absolutely.
So you still need to know upfront what it is you're going to be judging.
yeah, so we still might miss.
Well, the criteria are, we think it's a good idea.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Well, I'm just trying to set up an open-ended and sort of flexible
Yeah.
process for dealing with the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a difficult thing, because we're setting limits.
Hmm.
And do the limits matter,
Hmm.
or do they not? So that's where, if the limits really seem unfair,
Right,
you have the variance. So, I mean, we're already, I mean, the way we have it written now, we have the conditional use permits, which is setting up what we think, or maybe something different going forward, what we think is reasonable.
The
And
only-
if we set up the conditional use permit and then say, but here's a second level of conditional use for something we didn't think of here, we really should have thought of it here. If we're gonna do something like that, you know, make an exception, I think we should think through what that exception might possibly be and put it in the body of the conditional use permits.
Well, except that we're planning this and
we have no
not only
idea.
do we have imperfect knowledge, but we're dealing with terrain where the topography is shifting very rapidly.
But we're not tied into this. I mean, this is gonna be obsolete, I guarantee you,
Yeah.
in 5 years.
Mm.
Anything we write, and probably sooner. We can write this and you know, we're gonna hear things that we had not thought of. And then we come back and we say, we rewrite it.
Do we need to make a provision for how quickly, some kind of schedule for review? Because it does
We
take,
can.
it does seem to take a long time to review a lot, you know, we still haven't gotten to the
No.
housing chapter.
Well, I would say, you know, why should we be treating these differently than other structures? I mean, and I don't think that that's fair. Just because I wanna build a barn or something, why should somebody else get, you know, a special pass to get their solar project through?
Well, I feel a certain urgency around some.
Well, you know what, I think that kind of cows out the barn door at this point, and we're gonna do our best. But, I don't think that we're gonna, you know, we're not gonna hold somebody up that much. And our process is no worse than any other community's process.
We do have time, I mean, we do
Well,
have to be
absolutely have time
responsive
limits
within
on
time
the-
limits.
Well,
for
some
all
of the
the-
reviews though go on by mutual agreement,
Right.
and,
But, I mean, you know, it's a two-way street, you know. One of my biggest fights I always have with applicants is getting enough information for the board. Everyone wants to just, you know, do the absolute minimum, and then they get to the board, and the board says, well, I need this, 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 and this, or we can't make a decision, and the person says, well, I wasn't told that ahead of time. So, yeah, I did try to get you to, but then, you know, you have to, if the board wants the information, and the applicant says, no, I'm not gonna give you that, then the board has a right to say, no, sorry, we can't make a decision.
But that's only like a 2-week turnaround time, that's not,
Right, but that's, you know, that's,
that's not waiting months and months for.
I'll just say, some
So-
processes take longer, controversial projects take longer. I'm thinking about the indoor practice facility in Hanover. The college had a right to do it, the neighbors really didn't like it, and that dragged on for a long time, and it was meetings every week. It wasn't as though
Yeah.
people were postponing it at all.
Right.
But it just, you then possibly violate the public's right to be heard,
Hmm.
and I don't think that that's the right thing to do,
No,
so.
no, I was just suggesting some planned schedule for like
Well, we do have it in our, you know,
Yeah.
rules and regulations that, you know, you submit an application, it needs to be heard within
I'm
30
sorry,
days. and-
I meant for reviewing the ordinances.
Oh, for reviewing ordinances, I
Yes.
see.
So-
Well,
so-
seems
So
like
I
we're
was
all,
talking-
I thought you were talking
you're
about
expediting solar
Oh, no, no, no,
projects,
no, no,
I'm
no,
sorry.
no, no, it's like saying we do this ordinance now, and then let's revisit it in 5 years, and everybody knows we're gonna think.
No, we revisit every year, because if we have problems, we need to address
Yeah,
them.
I would
sooner
imagine
than
with
5
this,
years.
that we're not gonna have a choice,
Okay,
or the board, whoever's on the way, is not gonna have a choice but to,
good.
bring it
No,
up.
the whole zoning, I'd say is very dynamic, and when we run into things, we have to address them.
We have zoning amendments every year usually,
Well,
Or at least we work on them every
we
year.
work on them every year.
yeah.
And to your point, I would like to, we have to get this done, but I'd like to get to the housing chapter and some, at least, attempt to, you know, thoughts about particular housing, approaches that we can take.
So, John, to finish up on,
Yeah.
on solar, it sounds like we're gonna invite NHEC to come in.
I will call Stephen Doig,
Yep.
and if he doesn't sound like he's gonna call him, I'll call him, I'll cold call him.
And David now has a draft of a list of questions that we can throw over the wall to
Yep.
them. And then, do we wanna schedule them to come in?
Oh, well, that's what I would ask him.
Yeah.
When, I would ask him to speak to his contact and tell us when they'd like to come in.
Are there other people with expertise that we wanna reach out to that aren't, in addition to the power companies? Like, I'm thinking Stephen Doig, I would love to have him, if he wanted to, come in and
Well-
say, we're trying to figure out what we should do here, what would you do?
When I spoke to him, he sounded enthusiastic about being involved.
I'd love to hear what he
Yeah.
thinks our solar ordinance ought to look like.
I think-
I might not agree with it, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think who we really need to invite is a solar developer, somebody who might wanna do a 1 megawatt system and go like,
Well, we already had
we
one.
did have one.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I
There's a
think we
more
better.
local, I mean, what about somebody like Norwich Solar? I mean, you see them in the.
Right, well, I would like to hear from them.
Revision.
They only do the pole things,
Norwich Solar,
Norwich, yeah.
No,
They only
that's
do what?
solar flood.
But that's different?
That's
different.
They're also based in Norwich, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
they are.
Yeah,
and Norwich Technologies, I think it is, isn't it, and that's in White River,
right.
yeah. No,
That's confusing.
And they seem to
They
do,
started as a home
bigger-
business.
Wonder if there's an industry group that, that aggregates these companies that are, doing these larger solar developments, and if so, those sorts of industry groups often have people who are public
Lobbyists.
facing and who.
Lobbyists.
Yeah, they're lobbyists, but they might be, that might be somebody who knows a lot and who can
Right.
come in and talk to us, and we don't have to agree with them, but might get
Yeah.
information from them.
Yeah, well,
Well, I guess,
any
I
ideas
don't know,
about how to?
yeah, I would like to have somebody in the trenches, somebody like Sam, but maybe local, who, knows the territory around here. And a lobbyist, I feel like, might have a lot of experience across a state, or, for example, but they're paid to put a little spin on it, and I don't think I
So
wanna hear that.
I mean, you have an array. Do you think your person might wanna come in?
Who's your installer?
this one was Catamount,
Uh-huh,
and they seem like they're smaller.
they don't do
Half-
bigger
half a-
systems.
Half a megawatt and smaller.
Anybody
Because
else?
Actually, that's the kind of the limit of net metering in Vermont is half a megawatt.
Mine's from Revision.
Revision.
They're-
I've been in touch with Revision, they're pretty
Yeah,
nice.
They're really good.
Yeah.
Maybe we
My
should get
brother's
somebody.
used a lot of their technology out.
And
You know, I've
Revision-
called them so many times, I'd be ashamed to call them again.
Well,
but-
they I mean, they were Energy Emporium, who was our Solarize group, and then
Right.
Energy Emporium got bought by Revision, but Kim is still in charge of one
I think so, yeah.
element of,
Yeah,
So-
I think it's storage, she's in charge of storage.
Oh, is she?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, which is cool, but we're not talking about that.
But
We're
could,
in
if
production.
you know somebody there, could you ask her?
What do you want me to have come here one time
Yeah.
and let us
Yeah.
talk to you? I'd call.
Yeah, why not?
I would think they know a lot, even if they don't do big arrays, they might.
no, they do, I mean, that picture that, Mark had was built by Revision.
Oh, really?
In Maine,
In Maine.
That was
Yeah.
And then
huge.
they also did a, group net metering co-op, for farmers, down, I think it's in Cheshire County.
there's a pretty big one at Crossroads for,
Yeah,
Which
that
they
is
put
big.
in.
Yeah, we
put
approved it,
in,
we approved
yeah.
that.
I wonder who put that one in.
They did,
Really?
and Energy Emporium, yeah.
Did they?
Oh, Crossroads.
Crossroads.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think Revision would be good.
All right, so
If
you'll,
you want to talk,
you'll call
Yeah,
her.
yeah,
It's good to have somebody who knows New Hampshire.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a ton of places in Massachusetts, as you were saying, Rich, that are doing it, but
yeah.
so, to attempt to summarize, we now have at least a target we're shooting at with this, whatever that figure will be, when we find out, that would get us to the net zero. And we have these questions, we're gonna try and get Stephen Doig, Revision, and NHEC in.
Well, Stephen Doig is gonna ask NHEC, so
Well,
he wants
Well,
Stephen
I think,
separately.
well,
Yeah, I think-
this is a
Yeah,
question,
okay.
I think it'd be you know, he was participating.
Yeah.
He had,
Knows
my-
so much about this stuff.
yeah, my understanding of Steve, he was with Rocky Mountain Institute.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
fantastic.
Fantastic organization. He weatherized the Empire State Building. He was involved in the weatherization of the Empire State Building.
Right.
So, he has a very holistic view, or what do you call it, a higher level view
Mhm.
of this, that might be very useful. And if it isn't, well, you know, so we'll learn something anyway.
If nothing else, he may, even if nothing he has to say is useful to us, I bet he has sources.
Right.
A question you can ask him is, who can we talk to?
Exactly.
And he's gonna
Yeah.
know people.
Yep.
So,
So
Okay.
when I talk to Kim, do I have her contact David about scheduling then?
sure.
Okay, okay.
And when would we wanna talk to these people? Next meeting?
And
As soon
anytime.
as we can,
As
sure.
soon as we can, yeah. Right.
So.
I think it's wise for the group to, the board to take a information gathering stance for the next month or so, and then
And
try to
then,
write
and
some-
then
try to
pedal
write
to the
something.
metal.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable to everybody? I mean, at a certain point, we gotta.
Fish are cut
Make
bait.
decisions, but
Make
yes,
decisions.
right.
Okay. Any other thoughts that people wanna go over? Nat, do you wanna resign now? Or would you like to continue? Have you had enough? Okay, thank you very much for joining us. Shall we end here, or? people wanna-
Sounds good.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
Here's a motion.
There we go.
We need Jay Smith here to pack up his briefcase. That's a good motion.
Yeah, that's how we, that's